Welcome to another video, guys. Today we'll be comparing a couple of insane high-powered forced induction V8 front engine rear wheel drive track monsters. What a mouthful, but it's true. Today we've got the Chevrolet Corvette C7 ZR1 with the ZTK track package, and we'll be comparing it to the Mercedes AMG GTR Pro. This is not my first time behind the wheel of this ZR1. I had the amazing opportunity to push this car at Sonoma Raceway a few months ago, where I was completely astounded by the level of performance this car provides. But if I'm being honest, it felt like a bit of a blunt instrument on track. Tons of power, tons of grip, tons of braking performance, tons of downforce, but it wasn't exactly a fingertip driving experience. So today I'm going to see how this car drives on a canyon road. Of course, it's powered by the supercharged LT5 motor, 6.2 liters, with a 2.65 liter Eaton supercharger, pushing out 755 brake horsepower and 715 foot-pounds of torque. Insane figures for a front-engine rear-wheel drive car. Now with the ZTK performance package, we have retuned MagneRide dampers, ultra-sticky Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, a huge front splitter, a huge rear wing, carbon ceramic brakes, and one of the aspects that I really want to compare between the ZR1 and the GTR Pro is going to be the suspension. As I mentioned, this has the adjustable MagneRide suspension, whereas the GTR Pro has a more traditional two-way adjustable coilover setup. So I'm curious to see which one feels better out here in the canyons. Let's first go for a drive in the ZR1. I'm going to flip it over to sport mode, and I'm going to turn traction control off. 7-speed manual transmission. That is the only transmission, in my humble opinion, that is befitting of a high-powered V8 Corvette. Why does this car have 755 horsepower? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm glad it does. And I'm also glad that these carbon ceramic brakes, paired with the Cup 2 tires, means this car stops on a dime despite having all that power. It's very strange driving this car out here because at lower RPMs, you get plenty of torque. The car feels quick, but then at some point in the rev range, it's almost like VTEC kicks in, but in a very American V8 way. I guess that's what they call the engine coming on cam, but all of a sudden the induction growl just goes ballistic. Oh my goodness, what an insane amount of power being sent through the rear wheels, even though this thing has some massive Cup 2 tires out back. Let's drop it down to second. A lot of front end grip. Look, there is no way to hit the limits of this car on a road like this. I doubt any canyon road is sufficient for testing the ability of this ZR1 with the ZTK package. It has that much grip, that much power, and the gearing's pretty long as well, as it should be for a car of this type. If we can't attack the corners at maximum potential, at least we can for a few seconds in the straights. It's traction limited, all right. I cannot floor this car for more than 2 seconds. It's just outrageous. It's completely outrageous. The suspension with the ZTK package is retuned to be stiffer, specifically to be paired with these Cup 2 tires. And it jostles you around on a bumpy road. Excellent damping quality, but it's still very, very firm. Whew. Oh my goodness. Even in second gear, I can't get it above around 4,000 to 5,000 RPM. The car has a red line of 6,500, but I just can't even get it there. The gearing's long and Oh, it's just too much power. The steering of this car is interesting. It's electric power steering, and it's very heavy. Lots of weight when you load it up in a corner, but it doesn't give a ton of feedback. It feels artificially heavy and a bit numb, unfortunately. But with all that sticky rubber out front, I can actually give it a pass for that. It's hard to make a car have excellent steering feel when you have a very wide and sticky compound. Got the auto rev matching on because it's just too much work to blip my own downshifts right now. This car feels so wide, so big out here. It's hard to just keep it in its own lane. The sound of this motor is absolutely ridiculous. I love it. It's not exactly the most refined sounding V8, but boy, does it have some theater to it. All right, not gonna lie, this car is way too much for this particular road, and probably way too much for any canyon road. This car deserves to be on a wide open racetrack. Even when I tracked it at Sonoma Raceway, I felt that track was too tight and twisty to really explore the limits of this car. You need more straightaways and high-speed corners. I'm done. I can't keep driving this car. Outside of the poor front and rear visibility, this car is not actually that hard to drive around town. I've had it for the last 24 hours or so, and it's not particularly painful to drive around town, even with the track package. The Magnarite dampers in its softest touring setting, not too bad. But again, the car is way too much for this canyon road. Let's hop into the AMG GTR Pro and see if that is a better match. Alright guys, now we are in the AMG GTR Pro. This is essentially a more track prepped version of the already very capable AMG GTR. This particular car, owned by my friend Terry, has seen many track days and is nearing 10,000 miles, most of which have been done on the racetrack. So what does the Pro give you over a regular GTR? Well, first of all, you have the 3-way manually adjustable coilover suspension, revised front and rear aero, so it's got a bigger front splitter with canards. In the rear wing, they've added a gurney flap, although Terry has opted to swap out that rear wing with an AMG GT3 race car wing. It also has an adjustable front carbon fiber sway bar, as well as spherical bushings front and rear for the upper and lower control arms, whereas the regular GTR only has spherical bushings on the lower control arms. So it is more hardcore than the regular GTR. It's going to be stiffer, it's going to have a little bit less ride comfort and compliance on a public road. The engine is unchanged from the normal GTR. We've got the 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 producing 577 horsepower and 516 foot-pounds of torque, being sent to the rear wheels through this 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Now, 577 horsepower, guys. That is a ton of power, and yet this is almost 200 horsepower down on the ZR1, and 516 foot-pounds of torque. That is literally 200 foot-pounds down from the ZR1. Both cars weigh around 3,600 pounds, and this car, since Terry did swap in the Euro spec bucket seats, the weight is down to the 3,600 pound range. A normal US spec car would be closer to 3,700 plus pounds. Now, with that being said, let's see how this drives. We've got the drive mode in race, which is the most aggressive setting. That affects the engine response and the transmission. The suspension, as I mentioned, is manually adjustable, so it's currently set in a nice balance between street and track. Immediately, I'm able to use the performance of this car much more easily. It has shorter gearing, this dual clutch transmission giving me the perfect up and down shifts, nicely rev matched. No lack of straight line pace in this car, despite being down on horsepower compared to the ZR1. Oh my goodness. This car also has much lighter steering. A more delicate touch is required to pilot this. Yeah, this car is just so much more confidence inspiring right away. In the first 30 seconds of driving it hard, I'm able to get into a groove with this car that I was never able to reach with the ZR1. A big part of that is the steering. It's much lighter, and if anything, actually gives me a tad more feedback. Also, this suspension, oh my goodness, this is top-notch stuff. As impressed as I was by the Magnarite dampers, one of my favorite suspension setups in any OEM car, this three-way adjustable traditional coilover system is superior. So much control over the bumps, even at high speed, in a way that ZR1 was not quite able to match. It's not a night and day difference, but easily noticeable. This thing just soaks up the bumps, but you can still tell what the car's doing. Because of the shorter gearing of this dual clutch and just how rapid the shifts are on the straights, it feels every bit as quick as the ZR1, but with much less drama. This car seems to put the power down a lot better. And that's not because of tire grit, because this is also on a Michelin Cup 2 tire. Oh. Excellent carbon ceramic brakes. So much feel through that brake pedal. I would say the brakes are on par with the ZR1s. Maybe the ZR1 has slightly better pedal feel. Oh, it's brutal. The way this car puts the power down coming out of corners, it just hooks up. This is incredibly competent on a canyon road, which I did not expect. It's so funny, the ZR1 is the epitome of an American high-performance track car, whereas this is the epitome of a German high-performance track car. The ZR1 is all about huge power, huge grip, huge downforce, huge braking performance, but it just throws tons of everything at you in a not especially delicate way, whereas this car, the AMG GTR Pro, has probably less of everything, less power, less downforce, narrower tires, but because of the way it's so expertly and precisely tuned, it's able to use what it has more effectively. This car feels quicker on this road, at least with me behind the wheel, because I'm just so much more confident. I mean, just look at this here, second gear, roll on the power. No way I could do that in the ZR1. No freaking way. And somehow this car manages to hide its weight better than the ZR1 as well, despite both cars weighing over 3,600 pounds. This car is truly fantastic. This is more in line with how a Porsche GT car drives, whereas a ZR1 feels like a Corvette with everything turned up to not 11, but like 15, but just not quite there in terms of the way everything works together. All right, we gotta do a little pull here. Absolutely amazing. All right, we backed it down to comfort mode. Let's talk pricing for a moment. In today's market, in mid-2022, C7 ZR1s are going for anywhere from $180,000 to $200,000. The original MSRP in base form was only $135,000, so they have appreciated quite a bit. Less than 3,000 were produced, so it's a pretty rare car. Now, on the other hand, this AMG GTR Pro had a starting MSRP in base form of just over $200,000, so about 50% more than the ZR1, and yet today they are going for roughly $240,000 to $250,000, about $50K more than the ZR1. So between these two cars, almost $450,000 of current market value. And what can I say other than, if it was my money, if I could afford the ZR1, I could also afford the AMG GTR Pro. And for that additional $50,000 or so, there's no question, this Mercedes does more with less. And that's even reflected in their Nordschleife lap times. Both cars were able to do a 7-minute, 4-second lap. So I think that speaks for itself. Let me know what you guys think of these two high-powered V8 track monsters. If you liked the video, please leave a comment, subscribe if you have not already. Let me know what videos you'd like to see in the future. See you next time, guys.